porch light was still on when Sarah found Mark at 2 in the morning, sitting outside in his coat, looking at nothing in particular. "Couldn't sleep either," he said, not a question. She sat down next to him without saying anything else. 41 years married, and some nights the silence between them still said more than either of them could manage out loud. Earlier that week, a doctor had used the word concerning about a shadow on a scan, and neither of them had said the word that was actually sitting in the room with them since. Sarah reached over and put her hand flat against her own chest. "It's strange," she said. "It feels like it's happening to both of us at once, like there isn't a version of this that's just yours." He nodded, because he understood exactly what she meant, and because there was nothing else to say that would explain it any better. Psychologist Arthur Aron spent decades trying to explain moments exactly like that one. Not through poetry, through measurement. He built something called the inclusion of other in the self scale. 2 overlapping circles, drawn at different distances, and a simple instruction. Pick the pair that feels most like your relationship. Circles barely touching. Circles half overlapping. Circles so merged they're nearly one shape. It sounds almost too simple to matter. But what Aron discovered was that the pair people picked wasn't just a feeling, it was predictive. It tracked with how people actually behaved toward their partner, how quickly they used we instead of I without noticing, and later, in brain imaging studies, something even stranger. When people watched something happen to someone they loved, the regions of their brain associated with their own physical sensation lit up, almost as if the boundary between self and other had quietly blurred at a level far beneath conscious thought. Sarah's hand on her own chest wasn't a metaphor. It was closer to biology than either of them realized. In some of Aron's studies, when a person watched a loved one experience physical pain, activity showed up in the same neural regions that respond when we feel pain ourselves. Not identical, but overlapping enough to suggest the brain doesn't always draw a hard line between what happens to us and what happens to someone we love. Which raises an uncomfortable, beautiful question most people never sit with. If your brain is already partly responding to their pain as your own, what does it mean when you keep insisting out loud that you can handle everything separately, that you don't need them to witness what you're going through? Maybe the body already knows something the mind is still resisting. Subscribe and turn on notifications for daily love psychology, because what you're about to hear next explains something almost nobody talks about when they talk about falling in love. Here's what most people misunderstand about closeness. They think it's built entirely out of romantic, dramatic gestures. But Aron's research, going back to the earliest days of his career, pointed somewhere quieter. He called it self-expansion. The idea that people are drawn to relationships that grow who they are, not just relationships that feel good in the moment. Early on, that expansion looks obvious. New restaurants you'd never have found alone, new music, a new way of arguing about a movie until 2 in the morning, because you actually want to know what they think. Sarah remembered the early version of that. She met him at 26 at a mutual friend's apartment, and what she remembered most wasn't attraction exactly. It was that after 3 hours of talking, she felt like a slightly larger version of herself, curious about things she hadn't been curious about that morning. That's the part almost nobody explains about the beginning of love. It doesn't just feel good, it expands the self. There was a specific night Sarah still thought about sometimes. Their third date, standing outside a closed bookstore at midnight, arguing cheerfully about a novel neither of them had actually finished, both too stubborn to admit it. She remembered thinking, almost with alarm, that she wanted to know what this person thought about everything, every book, every ordinary opinion. It felt less like attraction and more like her own curiosity had suddenly doubled in size. Picture 2 circles drawn on a page. At first they barely touch. Separate lives, separate calendars, separate versions of someday, then almost invisibly the edges drift closer. Not until one circle swallows the other, only until a shared space appears in the middle, belonging to both. That overlapping space is where lasting love actually lives, not in either circle alone, in the new ground between them. Now here's where the story gets complicated, because self-expansion isn't only about the exciting years. Aron's later research found something couples rarely expect. The early, rapid growth of a relationship, all that newness, naturally slows down over time, which is exactly the moment a lot of couples panic and assume something has gone wrong. It hasn't gone wrong, it's gone quiet. The overlap that once expanded through novelties starts expanding through something else entirely. Through history, through witnessed years, through knowing exactly how someone takes their coffee, and what their silence means at 2 in the morning on a porch. Sarah and Mark weren't at the exciting stage anymore. They were at the stage where, "How was your day?" had long since become, "How are we doing?" Where winning an argument stopped meaning, "I got what I wanted," and started meaning, "We protected something bigger than either of us." That's why mature love feels fundamentally different from infatuation. Infatuation keeps asking, "How does this person make me feel?" Real love eventually asks a harder, steadier question. How do we build a life that protects both of us? One question chases a feeling, the other constructs a future, one ordinary Tuesday at a time, for 41 years, until a porch at 2 in the morning holds two people who have quietly, permanently stopped being fully separable. They stayed out there another hour, mostly in silence, watching the sky do nothing in particular. Eventually she said, "Whatever this is, we're finding out together. I'm not doing the waiting room part of my life without you, and you're not doing it without me." He didn't answer with words. He just reached over and put his hand where hers had been, over his own chest, like he was checking that the same thing was still true on his side too. That's the quiet architecture Aron spent his career mapping. Not two halves who found each other and finally became whole. Two whole people who spent decades letting the boundary between mine and yours soften gradually, without asking permission, until someone else's fear genuinely lived somewhere inside your own chest. If you're early in something, and it still feels like discovering new rooms in yourself you didn't know existed, that's not just chemistry. That's exactly what the research would predict. And if you're decades in, and the excitement has quieted into something steadier, that isn't your relationship going stale. That might be the very thing Aron spent his life trying to describe. The self, having grown so wide over enough winter together that it simply has room for someone else living inside it now, permanently, without either of you ever having signed anything to make it official. Because the deepest form of intimacy was never about losing yourself inside another person. It was discovering that love had quietly built a third space, one that belonged to neither of you completely, and both of you entirely. Subscribe and turn on notifications for daily love psychology, because next we're talking about why the healthiest love was never meant to complete you. It was meant to hand you back to yourself, fuller than you were before you found it.